We'll use the text editor, Notepad++. We'll just close off this other stuff I've been working on. So here's the text editor. You could use something as simple as Notepad. That's actually why I believe Notepad was called Notepad++, as so many of us learn to website design using Notepad. But this is a lot better. It is a dedicated code editor. But starting off, let's just type in, and this is the tradition for just about any bit of coding. We're going to type in hello world and see if we can display that on our application. We can call it app. So there's hello world. So we'll use the browser. So we'll save this one, file, save this as an HTML file. Save as hello world.html. This is my first web page. I'll put an exclamation point. Okay, 2 lines of text. I'll hit save. I'm using Control S to save. You could go File, Save, but Control S to save, and then click over here. So we're thinking about this, and then Control R to refresh. Okay, so there's all the text, except it's not 2 lines. Important point of HTML is it doesn't care about lots of space, or it doesn't care about new lines. So B and angle brace. So this angle brace B and angle brace is the start of a HTML tag, and the end, the B stands for bold, and the end of a bold will have the same thing, except after the less than sign there is a slash. So that's typically how the difference between the start tag and the end tag. The end tag is the same as the start tag, but with this slash after the less than sign, which I often will call the left angle brace. So let's save that and see if there's a difference. Control S and Control R to refresh. And now we can see over here. Let's just zoom in. Sorry about that. Zoom in, and now bold, and then just normal text. I can zoom into here too, but I think that will be pretty big. All right, but we still have no space. So some tags, most tags will have a beginning and an end, and the stuff in between the beginning and end is called the content, and that is what the browser, which part the browser affects based on the rules. It has sets of rules for what to do with the B tag, In this case, it's bold. This is a different kind of tag, and that's because it does not have an end tag. It wouldn't make sense. This is the break tag. So if we save that, you'll see what it does. Control S and Control R. So it made a break in here. We could add 2 breaks. Would that push it down further? Yes. Okay. I just want to also mention that for a while there, the rules were a little different. That there's a thing called XML. There's HTML and XML, and a lot of people are pushing XML. And there's a rule that says it has to have an end tag. But if you don't have an end tag, just put the angle brace or the slash before the second angle brace. And if I save that, you'll see that it doesn't make any difference. So I don't normally bother with this now. And since HTML5 says I don't have to. So anyway, this is the break tag. This is the break tag. The browsers don't care. They treat them the same. Okay, what else could we do? Let's just play with another tag that doesn't have an end tag. We'll save that. And HR stands for horizontal rule. And that makes a line across the page. A lot of people say that both the break tag and the horizontal rule tag are deprecated. But it's up to you whether or not you want to use them or not. Same with the bold tag. A lot of philosophy on the internet is with the advent of CSS, you don't want to use this. All right, something else that predates CSS as well came out in the early days of HTML is how to add an image, a picture on your web page. So the tag for image is img. Save yourself a couple of letters there. And, well, let's just add that. It's another tag that doesn't have an end tag. Control S, Alt Tab, and Control R. And nothing. Because it doesn't know where to find the image. So we need inside, right, after the tag name, that's img is the tag name, we're going to add what's called an attribute. An attribute has a name and a value. It's a type of variable. There's a list of different attributes depending on what tag it is, but the image has one attribute that you have to use, and that's src, which stands for source. And to apply a value to the src in HTML attributes, it's the tag name, then an equal sign, and then the value in quotes. And I'm just going to hit Control S to save it, but I'm going to go also Control Shift S to find save. No, sorry. File. Let's do it this way. File save as, which is Control Alt S, I guess, for this. Control S, Control Alt S. Save as, and I'm not going to say change the name. I just do this to, it defaults to the folder that we're in right now, and I can use that to figure out where my image is. So from here, it's in a folder called pics, and I've got circle, and I know this is a PNG file. So it'll be inside the pics folder, and then circle.png. I'll just cancel that. So inside the pics folder, and then circle.png. I'll save that and refresh this. Oh, and I've got a big circle. That's at 200%. So that's at 100%. It's Still a pretty big circle. I don't know if I need a circle that big. I could do the old way of setting the size of the circle, which is to, in HTML, I can give this another attribute. I'll just punch that down so there's space for it. And I could do height. And remember attributes, it's the name, then an equal sign, then a value in quotes. And what if I said, I think that PNG is 200 wide. Let's make it 50. And that we measured in pixels. Okay, so that makes it much smaller. But I just want to show you that this is the old-fashioned way. Using HTML attributes. And but we don't do that very often. It's still an option for you'll still see it in the website quite often. When code gets really complicated, sometimes it's just easier to do it this way. But we will now add CSS, cascading style sheets, so that we have more control over where and how big and what color and all sorts of things for what we put on the web page. So this is here all HTML. So I'll save this and hit Control R, and we'll see if we can create some CSS to change the size. But first, with the advent of CSS, and JavaScript came at just about the same time as CSS, there were some major changes to how website design is supposed to be done, because CSS and JavaScript are both object-oriented, and HTML wasn't. So since it's object-oriented, first of all, we should know what an object is. A object is a group of variables that have a common name. That's the overly simple definition that I like to use, but a variable is a value with a name. For example, here is an attribute. An attribute is a type of variable. It has a name and it has a value. The name doesn't change, but the value might. Okay, let's add some more HTML so we've got more of the proper structure. There's a lot more to what I'm going to HTML and website design than what I'm doing here, but I'll keep it as simple as I can. And there are more tag names. HTML start at the top of the web page, and the end tag for and HTML is right at the bottom. So /HTML. So that's the start HTML tag, and that's the end HTML tag, and that defines the document. The entire page is sort of the document. It's actually, well, let's not get too technical. The HTML tags represent the document in the document object model. Indenting, when we're nesting elements, is very common around all computer programming, not just website design. If something is inside something else, it's helps to indent it to keep it clear visually. So inside our HTML tags, we will add a tag called head. Oop. I got a little excited there. Okay. And then down further, I'm going to line it up. I'm going to have the end head tag. So there's going to be content in between these tags. They'll be inside the head, and then another set of tags after that, which will be body. And the stuff I already put in here I will have inside the body. So the head is where we put stuff that you don't normally see on the web page. So this stuff, the text and the image, are stuff we see in the web page, so we put those inside the body. Inside the head we put paperwork, stuff that we don't want to see on the web page, but extra information. And a very common one is the title. And it also has the end title. And we will just add the title for our web page. And we've saved this as hello world.html. So if you look up here in this tab name here, it says hello world.html. But watch what happens when we give it a title. So inside the title tags we will say hello. And save that and refresh that. I'm using Control R. You could just click here, but notice the difference. It went from hello world.html and now it is using the title. That's what the title is for. So that's one thing that we can use the head for. Another one is, that is a place where we can put our CSS. So we will add a style tag, and then further down we will add an end style tag. And it defaults to CSS, cascading style sheets. So the rule is that if it's, not the rule, but the suggestion is if something is inside something else, indent it. But I'm going to do a thing I like to think of as reverse indentation. First, I'm going to get rid of the indentation for the hello. I'm just going to put all this title, end title on one line. That will not change things. So Control S. Control R to refresh. It didn't change. Okay. And for the style tags, I'm going to reverse indentation, reverse indent, and you could put it here. Let's put the first one here and then move it over. I want, let's say, to change what my bold tag looks like. So I'm going to use CSS to do that. Right? It's the browser that decides, to make this bold, but using CSS we get to overrule it. So if the tag is bold, B, then I will create a rule, a CSS rule for the B tag. So the first part is the selector. In this case it's B to select the bold tag. And then I'm going to have a pair of curly braces. Well, I'll put them here first. We call this, in CSS we call this a rule, and the rule will apply to any tag, any content that is inside a pair of bold tags. So it should affect this. So let's change the color. So color, notice the American spelling, and so that's one of the options we have for styles. There are a lot more style properties, we call them. There are a lot more style properties than there are HTML attributes. there is no HTML attribute to change the color, but there is a style property. And when you're changing the properties, we have a different syntax. Remember that, okay, in HTML, the HTML syntax was the attribute name, then the equal sign. The equal sign is the assignment operator. We're going to assign this property, or sorry, this attribute value. So it's the attribute name, the equal sign, and then the value in quotes. Okay, so for a CSS style rule, you have for assigning a property, you have the property name, then a colon, and then the property value, and then we finish with a semicolon. And if you're used to programming in many languages, this looks more familiar, especially finishing the line with a semicolon. And when we get into JavaScript, you'll see the similarities. All right, save that and let's see if it works. Control S and Control R. And there. The CSS has changed any content that any text content that is surrounded by bold tags to the color green. We can also do something like let's change the size of this thing. Font size, because it's text. And you get used to this. We're going to be doing animation, so we're not going to be changing text a lot. Lucky I could remember that one. Font size, and I will measure in ems. You can measure in pixels or others, but ems is good. An M is the size of a capital M. So I'm going to go 3 times as big, 3 ems. And save that. And now it's really big and green. So that's the rule that we've created for our bold tag. So there's the rule. Changing the property, the color property, and there's changing the font size property. And this is a code block. And this is the selector. And this is HTML. Actually, the entire page is HTML, except that area inside the style tags, that's CSS. So let's try changing their image. Remember, we changed the size of the image using an attribute, but CSS gives us lots more options. So first thing we need to make a new rule is we need a selector to say this image is what we're trying to change. So what we could do is use the tag name. Well, first I remember I was going to just make things fit on here a little better. So I'm going to Shift Tab these over and then start from here. Using reverse indentation. Let's make a rule to say change any tags, any content for tags. I say image elements. Okay, let's just talk about that for a second. Tag pairs like this, but more so the ones that you see are define elements. This bold tag defines an HTML element, and the image tag defines an HTML element, and they are rectangles. Our image looks like a circle. That's only because it has a transparent background. It's actually a rectangle, and everything fits into rectangles, including text. If you, let's just give this a background color, and you will see that it is also a rectangle. So text are rectangles. Let's give this image a background color. And whoops, my bad. I tried to go for Control R to refresh, and I ended up with Control T. Let's try this again. Control R. Okay, so there is our same image, but now it's got a background colored blue. But this way we get to see just how big the element is and where it fits on the page. Let's okay. Let's add something else here. Quite often when we're spacing things, we want to give it a border or space in between. So let's just give it a margin and see if we can think of what it does. Let's do 2 M's. Okay, so there, notice that it's left space around the outside of the image. We could give this thing a border, but to see the border we will have border style. And we will measure in pix now. P1, px for pixels. I think that's right. Okay, I'm not sure anything is working. Oh, sorry. Not border size, that's border size. Border style, let's do solid. And, sorry about that. Border width would be for the 2 pixels. And let's see if we're 5 pixels. Okay. Well, what if we wanted space in between the rectangle, that's the element, and the border? Can you do that? You can. And that is padding. And let's make that 10 pixels. So this margin, border style, border width, and padding, if you want to learn more about that, just Google box model. And there's lots of stuff about how to do that and how useful it is spacing things out, but we're not going to use that very much. What we want to use is mostly size and placement. And we don't care much about this bold stuff either. In fact, we'll get rid of the text entirely. And okay, so what we have is one rule and one image. In fact, let's lose this statement. So one rule that doesn't do anything. So let's start by placing this ball on the page. Remember, we can size it. Let's do that first. How do you do that? Width 100 pixels. And if we do that, it keeps its aspect ratio. If we give it a height, then if we aren't careful, right, that should be a circle, not an oval, but if we mess with the aspect ratio, then we can get stretch the image. And early days of HTML, and you might still see this, they strongly recommend that you give the image, every image, its correct width and height from the beginning. And that way, as the page loads, the browser knows how much space to leave it for. Otherwise, it has to wait until it's got the image in from wherever it's getting, whatever website it's coming from. And so it might have text underneath it before it loads the image, and then as it's loading the image, the text keeps moving around as things are moving. And that's why people used to strongly recommend making sure you set both the height and the width. But I don't. Let's move this thing, or let's place it anyway. So the most common CSS properties to set are the top, which measures from the top of the page to the top of the image, or the top of the element. Okay, so from the top of the page to the top of the element, we go top, and let's say 200 pixels. And I'll save that and hit refresh. Nothing happened. And that can be quite the bug, because there is no default for the position property, and before you can set the top or the left property, you have to set its position property. So most common ones are absolute or relative. So let's use absolute, and we'll worry about exactly what that means later. Position absolute. So that now we've managed to move it from the top of the page to the top of the ball is now 100 pixels. And so let's give it a left value as well. Okay, so we can place it. So that's cool. What happens if we have multiple images, though? If we want multiple balls, I'm just going to copy. Now we should have 3 images, 3 circles. They're all using the same image, but there should be 3 of them. And let's save this and hit R. And it looks like there's just one, but in fact there are 3. They're just right on top of each other because they have the same top and left value. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to misspell position, so it won't know what to do about this. It'll ignore it. Save that and hit Control R. Now there's 3, and the top and left value aren't working. Remember, as I just mentioned, that top and left will not work unless position is set to something. So if we want to place these individually, where it's not going to work because we're using one rule for every image, and if we could have your slides or your pictures that you took on your vacation at the same thing, and they'd be the same. They'd all be in the same place with this rule. So they'd all be here. They might be different size. They'd all be 100 pixels wide, but they might be different heights. But anyway, it's not going to work. So how can we fix this? Well, we need more rules, and we need a way to say which element is which based on something other than the tag name. So what we will do is we'll give an identification ID. So the attribute name is ID. Then we'll have an equal sign and then a value in quotes. And each one of these images, if we're going to use an ID, we have to give each one a different ID. So let's say this is ball 1. And let's call this one ball 2. And call this one ball 3. And now we will use a different selector. Remember, the rule starts with the selector. So let's use a different selector now for, let's say, the first ball, ball 1. To pick an ID, CSS uses the pound sign and then the name of the ID, so the value of the ID. So if it's the value is ball 1, then the selector will be the pound sign and then ball 1. So don't put the letter ID up here. Right, the pound sign means ID. Okay, and so let's save that and refresh it. So we've lost, for ball 2 and ball 3, we have lost the size and the location settings. So let's duplicate this. Ball 1 is probably moved. It's just hiding behind ball 2 or something. And duplicate that. So we'll have a separate rule for ball 1, for ball 2, and ball 3. And each one of these is the ID values, right? These selectors. So this will be ball 2. And let's move it over. Not 3,000, that's too much. 300. And let's make this one 500. I think our page isn't big enough, but we'll just do this. And Control S, Control R. So that's ball 2 and ball 3, I believe. What's wrong? Oh, ball 1, ball 2, ball 3. Our first bug. My bad. Control S, Control R. So there's, I guess we don't have to make it too small or too large. There are 3 balls. Notice that they all have the same top value. They all have the same width value. They just have a different left value. But it seems like a lot of typing. So how we can fix that by using a class. Now, the rule for using an ID is every element has to have a unique ID, or do not use the same ID on more than one element. But a class is what you can use it on multiple elements. So let's just separate these so it's easier to see. Maybe let's widen it. Okay, so here's our ball one, our first ball element, and we've given it an ID of ball one, and we've given it a source value to find the image. Let's give it a class, and the class is our trick for setting the values for multiple elements at the same time. So class, right, the attribute name, then an equal sign, then the value in quotes. And since we're talking about what do all balls have in common, let's just name the class ball. And I'll save that, copy that, and paste it here and here, and I don't have to change it. They're all the same, but that's okay. You don't want the same values for multiple IDs, but there's nothing wrong with having the same values for multiple classes. Now, to give a rule using that class as a selector, classes where the pound sign uses the ID to find, or sorry, uses a hashtag to find an ID value, hashtag pound sign. Octothorpe. To find a class, use dot. That's just the period, and then the name of the class, and remember it was ball. And then we will add curly braces to create a code block, and then some statements. So what should we say all these balls should have in common? Let's say we haven't used height, so let's say we could give this a height of 300 pixels. So we'll see if we've done something. And refresh. Okay, so one statement has caused 3 balls to stretch. So I'm going to delete that, and what can we use from here? And all of, well, they all have the position absolute. They all have the same top value. Let's copy them all. And just get the stuff that changes. Actually, we don't even have to do that. Just the class values gets read first, and then the ID values, since they're underneath, will get read later. We can leave all that in there and just keep the stuff that changes from that. So it will start with the left value of 150 pics, but in this case, ball 2 and ball 3, the ID value, the ID rule, these rules, should overrule the left value. So let's see if that works. So I think that's working, right? So the position, the top value is 100 pics, left value for all 3 were here, and the width for each one is 100 pics. But then ball 1, well, it doesn't change. Let's just change it. So ball 1 gets, the left value becomes 100. Ball 2, the left value becomes 300. And ball 3, the left value becomes 500. So you see how that works? The class, because it's above on the page in the style sheet, it happens first and gave everybody a left value of 150. But further down the page, these get changed. What happens if we put the the class rule underneath. Okay, it made a liar out of me. So Command S and Command R. So apparently then ID values overrule class values. Good to know. Now I'm just getting rid of some white space to compact these a little bit. I still like to have the IDs below the class for no good reason at all. I guess maybe it's just a reminder that this is going to happen first before this happens, even though that's not why it's that. Okay. So let's see if we can write some JavaScript now to do something interactive. So let's get rid of ball number 2 and ball number 3. And so we don't need those rules, but we can keep this. Actually, let's just put this back in here. So we won't use the class, just the ID value. Okay, so we have one element on our page and one CSS rule to say where to go. Save that, refresh it. So there we are. 100 pixels from the top, 150 pixels from the left side. They look almost the same. Top 100, left 150, width 100. Save. Just making sure. What happens if we make this 0? This one's 0. Okay. And make this one 200. We'll hit refresh. Okay. That looks like it's working. So how do we add JavaScript? Let's do that first. Just begin our JavaScript. Actually, before I add JavaScript, I want to do something to the CSS, and that is to say, let's give this CSS its own folder. For a few reasons, it makes it a lot neater, but using Notepad++, this CSS here isn't color-coded. It's we're not getting all the advantages that Notepad++ is giving us, so that's one good reason to do that. And I can never remember what a link to a style tag looks like, so I always find one. So here, I got a new tab, and I'm going to go to a web page that I'm very familiar with. And then I'm going to right-click on it and view page source, just so I can see what a link to a tag looks like. There's some other things that you can add to these meta tags. They're good, awesome stuff to have in there. And as you go on further, you will learn to put them in. I'm not putting it in just so everything is nice and neat and tidy. But yeah, people say you should have these meta tags and this doc type tag. They're right. And maybe later we will, but right now I'm trying to keep it just as simple as the stuff we learned about. So this is the syntax for a link to a CSS file, but we haven't created the CSS file for it yet. So let's do that. So I'm going to go in Notepad++, I'm going to go File, New, and I'm going to go File, Save As, and I named the HTML file hello world.html. I think I'll change that. And I'm going to name the everything move ball. Actually, I'm going to start lowercase move ball dot CSS. So this, I'm creating a new CSS file, and I want to put it someplace good. But right now, I'm going to put it in the same folder. No, I'm not. I'm going to create a folder. So I can create a folder right now. And I'm going to call this folder CSS. And for no good reason other than it's a good reason, I'm going to have lowercase. So that's the folder CSS. Inside the folder CSS, I'm going to create this moveball.css file. So save. And I'm going to go back here and I'm going to save this with a different name. I do that quite a bit anyway, because if I build something I think is really cool and I don't want to break it, things are getting complicated, I will save it with a different name. So I'm going to name the web page moveball.html and save that. And here's a little tricky thing. Remember, if you start making changes here and you can't see it changing, it's because right now, let's say if I put in a change, say hello again, and I save that, and then I go back to the web page, and I hit Control R, it doesn't, the changes don't work. And I've caught myself on this a few times, and a few other people have as well. I saved it under a different name. The page we're looking at here was the original. It's Hello World. And here I'm changing Move Ball. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Run, launch in Chrome, and there it is. So we've got our Hello World file, and we've got some CSS, and down on the body we've got one image that looks a bit like a ball. So to make our work a little bit easier, let's move this CSS from inside the head here and put it into our moveball.css file. Just remember that the tags are HTML, so we don't need them. I'm just going to Control C, save it rather than cutting it, and Control V and paste it in here. Nothing but CSS, no tags. And save this. And now I'm going to just rename this so that the browser can't find it. And if we refresh the page, okay, so our CSS is broken. So when we get the new CSS linked up, we'll know it's fixed. And it's not coming from the old one. All right. So how can our web page find this CSS file? And what I do, because I can never remember, is I go to a web page I know I can find a link. And go to blueowlrock.com, which has lots of good stuff in it, but includes That's not what I want to do. View page source. Okay, there it is. And I know there's links in here to CSS, so I'll just copy this one. Control C, and back here in the HTML page, I'm going to put this style tag, or actually it's a link to a style tag, above this style. And I'll be deleting this later anyway if we can get this to work. So it's the link, HTML link tag, and it has an attribute of type, which is a value of text/CSS, and an attribute called rel, R-E-L, with a value of style sheet, and another attribute href, and it has a value that is the needs to be the address and name, the location of our CSS file. So this is what we need to replace here. So let's, from here, from this web page, what is the pathway to find the file? I go File, Save As. I'm not going to save it. I just use the, because this opens up in the current location. So from there I can find, and I'll hit the folder CSS, and inside it is moveball, and that's a CSS file. So it's a lot like this one, but it's case sensitive. So this time it's CSS lowercase and moveball lowercase dot CSS, all lowercase. Let's just see if that worked. And I can close that now, and I can close that now, and hit Control R. Okay, so now our CSS is working again. It's not this, so we can get rid of this entire set, including the tag name. The tags, CSS tags. So now it has a link to the CSS file instead of the CSS in the head. Control S, and look at our CSS, and notice the advantage that now this is color-coded, which can be quite the help. So we cleaned it up, and we've got the power of Notepad++'s CSS color coding. Okay, so this is all working. Now let's get the JavaScript to work. Oh, let's just change the title. Do a little bit more house cleaning. Call this move ball. And yeah, I think I'm happy for now. Let's add in the body, let's add a button to click to tell the browser when to run our JavaScript. So button, that's a tag name, and let's give give the button some content. You know, I'm going to say click me, and I think that should show up on the button, and then end the button tag. So let's see if what that looks like. Hit Control R to refresh. Okay, that looks about right. And if you click it, it looks like it's being clicked, although it doesn't do anything. So that's good. And so let's add some JavaScript. And we do that, put the JavaScript in the body after all the other elements are inside, because we will be looking, our script will be looking for elements, and so the script needs to be after the elements have been created, or it won't find them. If we put the script, and sometimes you put the script up here, but you'll have the problem that if the script is trying to find the button element or the image element, it won't be able to. So we're putting the script down here, and the script, we use script is the script tag name, and down here we'll put the end script tag, and then let's test it. So inside our script, we will use a built-in JavaScript function, and it's called alert. JavaScript functions start lowercase character, and all function names end in brackets. Sometimes you put stuff in the brackets and sometimes you don't. And this is a statement, so it ends in a semicolon. CSS statements end in semicolon as well. Perhaps that's a coincidence. Maybe not. But alert is a JavaScript function, but inside the brackets, we're going to give the function some information. And what we're writing in here is what is going to be show up on the pop-up. So we will type, yay, we have JavaScript. And if this works, we should get a pop-up that says this. If it doesn't work, we're going to have to check what the problem is with our JavaScript. Also, you can save, refresh, and this happened right away. Right, as soon as the page loaded, it ran this JavaScript alert to say make a pop-up, and in the pop-up, write this text. And there it is. Okay, so yay, and we have JavaScript. So I'm going to hide this, and what I've just done is turned it into a comment. In JavaScript, you can create comments with double slash. Then anything on that line after the double slash will be ignored by the browser. And this now is something for the a human being reading the code. The browser doesn't care about it. How do you spell yay? Apparently you don't. Okay. Script. The script is working. What we want to do now is create our own function. Remember, this is a function that was built in with JavaScript. Now we're going to create our own function. And to create our own function, we use a keyword in JavaScript. Don't use this keyword for other things. It'll mess things up. But the keyword is function. And that creates a function, so don't name anything else function. It'll break it. So function, and so when I name things, I like to concatenate words. So if I got 2 or 3 little words, it's far less likely to be a keyword in JavaScript, although there are keywords in JavaScript, so we will be using one pretty soon. That includes multiple words. Okay, function, what will we come up with a smart name. What we want this button to happen when we click the button, we want the ball to move. Let's name our function moveBall. Start function names with a lowercase character. Don't start with a number. Don't start uppercase. It will work, but it's not proper JavaScript. So move ball, and I've concatenated 2 words, and I'm using the camel case, and it's a function name, as I mentioned. All function names end in brackets, and this whole thing. Okay, we've got the function keyword, then we've given our function a name. Do not put special characters in your function names, although you could use a underscore. A lot of people do that. I don't, because it makes my little finger stretch too far when I'm typing. So I like this type of camel case. And you can put numbers in, just don't start with a number, right? But you can say move ball 2 or move ball 3 or move 3 balls or whatever, something like that. Just do not start with a number. That will break it. Okay, so function keyword, function name followed by brackets, and then a pair of curly braces to hold our statements, and right, this defines a code block. we will have other kinds of code blocks. Right? We had code block in CSS. Now we're using a code block to define a function. And we haven't seen the last of code blocks. So a pair of curly braces with statements in between is a code block. Now to create a JavaScript statement, we will learn by example. Our first one is an alert. So let's just copy that. And we will say, and when I'm testing quite often, I will say where we're at. So in case I get pop-ups that I forgot to delete, I will find them by what the pop-up says. So I'm going to say in moveball. So I'll save that. And then when the function is called, we should get this pop-up. So I get refresh, and the function isn't called, so we don't get the pop-up. We're going to call that function by naming it. Remember, we call it, say, an alert function by just using the name. So let's do the same thing with moveball. Just use the name of the function to call the function. And it includes the brackets. And it's a statement, so it includes the semicolon. So when we run this, it should find this statement and say, oh, you want to run the function called moveball. Well, here it is. So we're running the function. We should run this statement. Let's see if it works. Refresh. Okay. And it ran right away because moveball is not in a function. It's right there. And moveball called, right? The statement called the function and called this alert. So we've got a function calling a function. So that's all good. And we just did that to test whether or not our moveball function was working. So let's now, instead of having it run just as the code is running, let's have it run when the button is clicked. And we do that by putting another attribute inside the button tag, the opening button tag, which is this one. Where we did when we create an image tag, we put these attributes inside the opening tag. So we've got 3 attributes inside the opening tag for the image. And for example, here's the link tag, and it's got 3 attributes inside it too. So let's add an attribute inside the button tag. So after the button tag name, the attribute will be on click. Right, so it's, the attribute name, then an equal sign, then the value in quotes. And the value will be the name of the function. So we'll take this out of here and put it in there. So, right, this is the attribute value that's, oh, let's lose that semicolon. Oh, that's good like that. Okay, so the button now has an attribute. The attribute name is on click, and the value is the name of a JavaScript function. Let's save that and test it. And when we click the button, yay! So now our moveball function will not run until the button is clicked. Makes sense? Looks good? Okay, so how do we get our function to actually move the image of the ball? So let's delete that. No, let's hide it again. Eventually we should delete all those because they get messy, but they're very handy when you find a bug. So what we need is the JavaScript needs to know what it's working with. This is an image element, that's a button element. Different things are elements. When you create a tag pair in the body, you get elements. rectangles on the page. So we need to be able to find this element, and we can use it using its ID. So now we're going to create a variable. We haven't created any variables yet, so let's play around with that first. So I'm going to say, to create a variable, you use the var keyword. Remember, when you created a function, you use the function keyword followed by the name. So we're using the var keyword, and then we've got to come up with a name. And I'm going to name it n number. And I'm using a special type of camel case for my variables. Let's call it my number. Okay, so camel case means that it's a bunch of words concatenated together, and each word starts with uppercase and all the rest are lowercase. This is a special type of camel case, which is called Hungarian camel case. Not because it was made in Hungary, but people are suggesting that it's got a funny accent to like pronounce number. Well, I can't speak Hungarian. No, just kidding. If you're Hungarian, no, we're all just to show we love you. We can make fun and point and laugh. Okay. Anyway, Hungarian camel case. It starts with an abbreviation for whatever type of variable it's going to be. In this case, n means it's going to be, well, an integer, which is, you can think of number. There are other kinds of numbers, like a float, which is if it's a decimal place, and an integer has no decimal places. So I'm going to assign this a decimal value of 5. Just for if you're used to other coding languages like C or Java, not JavaScript, Java is something quite different. They're a lot pickier about what type it is. So in JavaScript, you can put any type of value in here. I could say 5, and this would be a text value or a string, and JavaScript doesn't care. It would still work. In fact, you can change variables with different types on the fly. And we do that a little bit. Sometimes it's handy, but it's because it's so forgiving, you can get yourself into trouble. So you have to be a little careful with that. You have to watch out for your stuff where the programming language doesn't do it for you. They'll take anything. Anyway, var my number equals 5. And let's use our alert here. So it says in move ball. And then I'm going to say n my number is, and this is the name of a variable, but it's not treated that way because it's in quotes. Whatever's in quotes is going to show up as is. So if we save this and refresh it, click me, right? This is all just as it's here. If I mistyped it, it wouldn't matter. It would just show up whatever it is. But now we're going to use the name of that variable. So we're going to hit the plus sign. We're going to add something to that text. And what we're going to add is, again, the name of the variable. So notice this part's in quotes, is going to show up as is. This is not in quotes. So JavaScript will know it's the name of a variable. At least it will assume so, and it'll look for names like that. And if it will swap out the name of the variable with the actual value of the variable. So let's just try that and see. And there it says, in move ball, my number is 5. So that's using the name of a variable in JavaScript, JavaScript just swaps out the name with its value. Okay, so that's one type of variable. Well, that's not really what we want to do here. So instead, we're going to create a variable var, and now we need to name it. And I'm going to use Hungarian camel case, so I need an abbreviation for the type. And in this case, it's an object, but it's an object that represents the element on the page. Remember that we have different elements. We have a button element here, and we have an image element. This is the element we want. So I'm going to say elm ball, and then an equal sign, and then an assignment, and it's document. Remember, document is everything between the starting HTML tag and the ending HTML tag. So somewhere in there, we're going to look for an element with a certain ID, and this is a built-in JavaScript function. So, and JavaScript is case sensitive, so it has to be spelled just like this, including the capital letters. Get element by ID. Notice the ID looks kind of funny. Capital I, small d. And then because it's a function, it ends in brackets. And this is a statement, so it's going to end in a semicolon. But we're looking for an element with a certain ID, and we're going to look for this element. So this is the ID value we want. And I'm going to copy it, including the quotes. So, and let's just reverse indent so we got room for everything. Sorry. That's not what I wanted to do. Okay. All right. Just take that. Shift tab. Okay, that's better. I made a mistake. Okay. Where were we? Okay. We've just created this variable, named it elmball, and we're assigning it a value. And the value we're assigning it is we're going to get a reference to an element on the page. And we use all that looking, right, using document dot, and that means look inside the document and use a function, a built-in JavaScript function called getElementById to find any element with the ID as the value ball1, which is coincidentally not that. All right, now let's test it. So we'll use our alert. Actually, we can leave it in here. It'll work. And Control C, I'm going to just say, instead of checking what my number is, I'm going to paste the name and again. So now it'll say elmball is, and then the value of elmball. Save that and refresh it, and we put it in the function. So we have to click the button to run it, and it says in moveball elmball is, and it says object HTML hypertext markup language image element. So that's what we want. It's an object, it's an image element, right? So this is an image element and it's an object, so that's awesome. So what happens if, say, we had misspelled this? And we tested it. It gives us nothing because it couldn't find this, and that broke the JavaScript. So what happens if we misspell it here. And hit refresh. Click me. Now it says in move ball, elm ball is null. So the JavaScript worked. Right when we misspelled the element, it didn't work, it broke. This time the JavaScript worked, but it's saying to us that we could not find elm ball is nothing, right? It's broken. Elm ball, which we created here, couldn't find any ID XX01, so it ran, it created elm ball, but it set its value to null. So fix that. Make sure we fixed it right. Okay, so elm ball is an image element. So now that we have a link to this, we can change its CSS properties. So I will hide that again. So to change stuff in elm ball, we will say elm ball dot, or we like digging into the document to do stuff. We're going to dig into this element dot, and we're going to play with its CSS properties. So what CSS properties do we have? Here's the CSS properties we played with already. What could we change? Top, left, width. Let's see if we can change the height. Dot. I'm going to do this wrong first to show a common problem. And it should be a number. So let's say 500 so we know it'll work. When it works, we'll know a difference. And refresh that. And click the ball. Whoa, that worked and I didn't expect it to. So, it's all good. Elm ball.height. So we can change lots of properties. Width, height, what position. It's actually what we want to do. So let's change this to left. And 500 might be a bit much. Let's try 300. Right. In CSS, left is 200, so it should hop over 100. Okay, refresh the page. Now the CSS is set the left value to 200. If we click the button, nothing happens. Elm ball.left equals 300. And I was surprised it worked. The other one worked because I believe you have to have the word style in here. So maybe working was the glitch. Let's try this. Oh, and refresh. Did I just forget to push the button? Click me. No. So you have to have that style in there. Although apparently for height you don't. That makes sense now that I think about it. The reason being that the HTML here has an attribute called height that you can change the height with here. Sorry, an attribute, you get name, then an equal sign, then the value in quotes. And so if we had it 500, other 500, right, so that's why this worked. We weren't changing the CSS height property, we were changing the HTML height property, which is a different thing. So what happens if we change the height property now here? Style height. And let's make that 50. And click me. Right. So this is changing the HTML style property, but if we get rid of the style and click it, we are changing the image tag height attribute value, which kind of does the same thing. So I'm getting off on a tangent, but there are some times where you need the word style, for example, the left value, and times where you don't. For example, later on we're going to change the src value, and that is here. Let's get rid of this. Right. We will be changing the src value, which is an HTML attribute, and in which case we will not use the style word in here. Anyway, so here we have set the left value in CSS to 200 pics, and that runs when the page loads. So right now the page is loaded and the left value is 200 pics. But when we click the button, that calls a JavaScript function, and the JavaScript function, right, overrules the CSS style value and moves the ball.